Welcome into another episode of the News4JAGs podcast. I'm Jamal St here alongside Justin Barney. All right, so we're counting down to training camp, and we have already rolled out our way too early 53-man roster predictions. Last year we had a friendly bet. I edged him in the second go-round. I was able to win by like one roster spot.
One spot.
So we'll see if I can hold on to my title as the roster predictor.
Yeah, it was tight last year. It was tight in this year's roster. I mean, putting those together yesterday, it was tough. I mean, there are some, slam dunk positions where it's happened. But I would say probably 11 to 13 positions are a little bit tough.
Yeah, there's some tough spots. Similar enough to last year, there's not a whole lot of starting jobs that I feel like are really up for grabs. I feel like the starting lineup's pretty much sold down, except for a couple of spots where there'll be some fierce training camp battles. So I don't think there's that drastic of a swing for a lot of spots, but there are a couple of spots where you're like, how do I get this guy in? The numbers squeeze. So if you want to see the full roster breakdown, go over to news4jags.com, click on the sports page, and you can watch along, have it in front of you. We're not going to go through every position by position, but we'll talk about a couple of guys that maybe got squeezed off of our 53s that we were upset about, and a couple of key positions that we had some different opinions on. And one of those differing opinions, we'll start with quarterback. So, look, neither one of us cut Trevor. So that would actually make for a hook, though.
That's a surprise. That would have been a good one.
If we cut Trevor, we'd be looking for the clickbait there. But we kept him. But I kept 3 quarterbacks. Justin only kept 2. So a little bit of a different, I guess, philosophy there. I think there's a conversation to be had with Mac and CJ basically competing for that backup quarterback job. Do you keep both of them? Is it worth it? Or do you only keep one?
And you brought up a good point about this, because if you keep 3 or you keep 2 and you move on, you can't stash a CJ or a Mac on the practice squad, because somebody's going to come and yank them away. I mean, look at Nathan Rourke last year, got snatched off the practice squad, I think, by the Patriots. So if you put one of those guys, they're not going to be on the squad. So you're going to either have to keep 3 or wish one of those guys goodbye, because they will get plucked off a practice squad. Very simple. I mean, look at Joe Flacco, what happened to him, and I think both Mac and CJ have higher upside than Joe Flacco at this point in his career and theirs. So, yeah, I went with 2 quarterbacks. Went with Mac Jones, a guy they dealt for to back up Trevor, and I think CJ could be a guy that ends up on another team this year.
He really could. Look, I kept all 3. So that was one of the key differences, which I kept all 3, and then I kept wanting to go back and take one off.
It's tough.
Because I was like, that extra roster spot could be a guy.
Yep.
It could be a person at another position. If I only kept 2, I'd keep Mac. I think if out of the 2 of them, you have the best chance of stashing CJ on the practice squad. I think Mac's more likely to try and get poached. As opposed to CJ, who I think you might be able to sneak on. But I still think that's a stretch, because he has been an established backup in this league, and teams are always looking for those veteran backup quarterbacks. So I think there's a big conversation to be had. Those emergency quarterback rules in the NFL will play a role. So it has evolved. Last year, the emergency quarterback had to be on the 53. They made the change this offseason. That emergency quarterback only has to be on the practice squad.
Right.
But you'd have to bring them up by standard, that elevation on game day in order for them to be eligible for the emergency quarterback spot. And you can only do that a certain number of times a year.
Right.
So then you have if we feel the need to have an emergency quarterback slot, how do you get that? And practice squad doesn't cover you for the entire year. So I think there's a conversation to be had. I do think CJ and Mac are going to be an interesting battle to watch.
Right. CJ's been in the offense a little bit longer. He knows the Press Taylor scheme. So, yeah, I do think it's going to come down to who performs better in the preseason for me, because I went with 2, Jamal went with 3. I could easily see him keep 3, because you got 2 kind of proven guys. I mean, Mac, for his struggles in New England, he did lead the Patriots to the playoffs in his rookie season.
Sure did.
CJ performed well in Trevor's absence last year. Who gives you more upside, CJ or Mac? And I think Mac Jones does give you more upside. I mean, the pedigree of a first-rounder.
Yep.
Led his team to a playoff spot, and CJ, I think the first game he won, the first game he really got on the field, and any kind of starting mentality was last year when Trevor was hurt. Well, it's time in Jacksonville. So
yeah, first time in Jags.
Yeah, so it is challenging, but when you look at the roster and how tough it is to create, this is Jamal and I doing this. When you look at the roster and how tough it was for us to make some of these decisions on roster spots, how tough is it going to be for Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson and the coordinators and position coaches kind of making their case for their guys? So it's tough. I mean, you think one roster spot's not that hard to deal, come up with?
No, it makes a difference.
It's challenging. It is challenging.
We'll talk about some of the like hard cuts. I mean, the next position we're going to do is offensive line, and there was one guy that I think both of us went back and forth that we had our initial 53 kind of down, and we're sitting next to each other kind of working, and we both said, oh no, I got to get this guy on some kind of way, and trying to figure it out. So I did my 53, and I ended up leaving him off. So I ended up keeping an undrafted free agent on the offensive line. I kept 2 undrafted free agents on the roster. One of them was Stephen Jones.
Big Grizz.
Big Grizz. So we kept him on the interior of that offensive line, but that spot kind of cost you the local hometown guy, Cooper Hodges. Maybe they can stash him on the practice squad. But he was the guy where we kind of both looked up and said, oh, man, how do you get this guy on the roster?
Yep.
Where's the spot for him? You didn't keep Stephen Jones. You kept Tyler Shatley.
I did.
I went the opposite direction. I went younger. He went with the old trusty veteran.
I went with Tyler Shatley, and I found a way to get Cooper on there.
Yeah, I stuck him in.
My thinking on that is not a lot of veteran presence on that line. Shatley gives you that.
Yeah. With
Cooper last year, yes, he's a 7th-round pick, but he made it all the way through camp. He made it on that 53. He had the knee injury up there in joint practices in Detroit. Yep. Went on the IR for the entire season. But for Jacksonville to have stashed him on IR, to have kept him through cuts and throughout a season when you could have released him with an injured designation or something, they like Cooper Hodges and what he brought to the team. Yes, he's a local guy, great story. But they had high hopes for Cooper Hodges last year. So I thought keeping him last year through that injury, stashing him on the IR, keeping him around, I thought that bodes well for this year. But I could see the big Grizz sticking around. And Tyler Shatley, I could see him moving on too. But they brought Tyler back, and I think he is on there. But man, it is tough. I think they keep 10 offensive linemen. I do think there's some flex on who those last 2 will be.
Look, I think they really like Cooper Hodges. I really do, and it was really tough for me to kind of leave him off. Because I do think the Jaguars, I think you're right. I think they want to keep him around. I think ultimately he'll find a way on the roster, whether that's because of an injury. I think the best case scenario this offseason, and they do this with interior offensive linemen, they cross-train at center. If he goes and can win the backup center job.
That's true.
Then you're on the team.
Right. I mean,
now,
Luke
that
Fortner
might mean
is,
that guy's gone, but that would keep Cooper.
Right.
I mean, so that would be my thought, is if Cooper can cross-train at center, which he has been doing, center and guard, if he showed them that he was a competent enough center to be the backup center, not only does that get you on the roster, but that gets you active on game day because now you can back up 2 spots, as opposed to like Fortner. They're not putting Fortner in at guard.
Right.
Fortner's a center.
Let me ask you this. So Cam Robinson, last year of his deal.
Sure.
He's an expensive guy on that team, expensive contract for Cam. Do you kick the tires on Walker Little at left tackle? Do you move Anton to left tackle, put Walker at right? Is there a scenario which you go into the season, week 1, where Cam Robinson's not on the team?
Not on the team?
Not on the team.
I mean, maybe if some team came a-calling and needed a left tackle help and was willing to pay up. And keep in mind, just trying to think about how the way Trent Baalke thinks, Cam's probably going to get a decent enough deal if he hits the open market because of the starting experience. I mean, he's a veteran, so you got to let's think comp pick,
right?
Let's think comp pick for that expiring deal, which is what he would be banking on. And let's say Cam signs a pretty hefty deal, which gets you a comp pick of possibly a 3rd rounder. So that means in his mind, a team's got to come calling with at least a 2nd to make it worth his time. Because the money's already there. He's already allotted for it. So it's not like he's going to he'd be freeing up money to go get a guy or something like that at this point because you're already there and there's not like some big free agent on the street that you're going to spend that money on.
So Cam, looking at the reason I asked that, I mean, I was looking at the spot rack numbers, contract deals yesterday, and Cam would be a savings of about $17 million.
Sure.
Dead cap a little over $4 million. So again, Walker Little's last year of his deal as well. So maybe I don't know. Just thinking about it, looking at the numbers yesterday.
I think week 1, Cam Robinson will start at left tackle.
Okay.
Does Cam? The odds say if you look at Cam's career, he will not play the entire season at left tackle. I mean, in recent since Doug Peterson's been here, Cam Robinson has not played a full season's worth of games for one reason or another: suspensions, injuries, whatever. So the odds say at some point Walker Little's number will be called. Now, the question that I would have is the same question that I posed last year, and it didn't come together. But do you give Cam the job back after you slide Walker into that starting lineup? Especially now, this go-around, if Cam goes and gets hurt, let's say he starts the first 5 games. Let's say he makes 5 games in, just tweaks a hamstring, minor, going to miss 2 weeks. Walker starts for 2 weeks. Walker looks pretty good out there.
Right.
And you say, maybe Walker's our left tackle of the future.
Now, you brought that exact scenario up last year.
I sure did.
Cam,
and they handed the keys back to Cam.
It didn't pan out as well because Walker didn't play as well.
But now you're in it's like driving the car and you could buy the new car, but you don't have to. Now the engine's going out.
Right.
like that light's flashing and you're like, I'm on the last leg. You know, you on the spare tire and not a spare tire got a nail in it. Yep. You got no choice but to go get a new tire.
So you got two tackles in the last years of the deal.
Yep.
So Cam Robinson, last year of his deal.
Yep.
Walker Little, last year of his deal. Mm-hmm. Who's got more upside for you if you're Jacksonville?
Walker. It's unquestioned.
Do you re-sign? Let's say Cam and Walker cost roughly the same on the open market to bring one of those guys back next year. We've not been too overly impressed by Walker Little in his time. He's been just kind of average. Who do you bring back? I mean, there's obviously not a replacement tackle that you feel comfortable on the roster to slide into that position.
No, you bring back Walker.
You bring back Walker.
Without a doubt.
Okay.
It's not, I mean, if I'm picking between the two, Walker's younger. If it's the same price, that makes more sense because you're getting a younger player who the idea is maybe his best football is still in front of him as opposed to Cam, who we kind of know he's probably played his best football at this point. Could still be a good starter, but you pay Walker. Look, at some point you have to move on from guys. I think this is probably Cam's last go-round in Jacksonville.
Agree.
Now, I think the better question would be, is Anton your left tackle? And we've had this discussion too. And if Anton's your left tackle, who's your right? I think that's your better question. Walker Little wants to play left. He's a natural left tackle. That's where he's more comfortable than right. But if I'm picking between Cam and Walker at the end of the season, I'm picking Walker.
I need to see a little more from Walker before I would.
I've seen enough. Look, at the very least, you know Cam's not playing a full season's worth of games.
Right. And historically has shown that.
History says that. And he is how much older than Walker?
Yes.
Considerably.
True.
So it's the same argument we made about Calvin Ridley. If I'm giving the two of these, like let's say I'm going to give each one of them a 4-year contract. The idea is by the end of that 4-year contract, Walker Little is going to be considerably younger as opposed to Cam, who is toward the tail end of his career. At the end of that 4-year contract, how good of football is he still playing or has he decided to hang it up kind of deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah, offensive linemen can play till they're gray beards.
Some can. But is Cam that guy? I don't know.
My question on Cam is, does he have that fire, that tenacity to kind of want to get better? And he wasn't good last year. I mean, he was a very average. I mean, everybody on Jacksonville's line was average to below average last year. Anton Harrison, I think Anton, he's going to be better this year, just the natural progression. Cam was not good. He was the high price guy in that line along with Sheriff, and at least Brandon was banged up a little bit. Cam was just...
Anton was banged up too.
Anton was banged up too, and rookie as well. But Cam, to me, since that coming back in Jacksonville, being that high-paid guy, he's just kind of been a guy. He's not been that wall at left tackle. And his numbers back up. You can look at PFF. His grades have just been average. And he should not be average for a guy that's making top 2-3 salaries on the team.
And keep in mind, like my one defense of Walker Little is he's never played consistently. Since he's been in the NFL, he's been a spot fill. I mean, think about it when the Jaguars are on that run, his second year in the league, he's filling in for Cam. He doesn't fill in until the end.
Mm-hmm.
Home stretch of the season, Cam goes down, Walker has to step up.
Right.
Last season, he knew he was going to get 4 games to start the year. But even in training camp, he's splitting reps and cross-training that guard, all at the same time, getting ready to start. And he knows week 4 Cam's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably yanking him, and then they try and slide him inside to guard. Then he gets hurt. So he's never really gotten a chance to, like, get his sea legs in the NFL. If I'm giving him the same contract at the end of the year, I'm going Walker.
Going to Walker. All right.
I'd go with Walker.
Or do you start over at tackle?
I mean, that's an argument, too. I wouldn't start over at left tackle. If I was going to start over and let both of them go, I move Anton over. Maybe you like what you see from Javon Foster.
Maybe.
And you make him your right. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you decide it's easier to get a right tackle in the NFL, which it is, than it is to get a left. But the question is, how good is Anton at right, and is it worth gambling on switching him back to left if you know he's a really good right?
Right.
So, got to weigh your options. That's an interesting conversation. We got a little derailed, but we'll definitely have a chance to talk about that as we kind of move through the season, and maybe if it materializes where they move on, who knows? But I think that left tackle spot's a little bit more of a position battle than maybe we're giving it credit for. If Walker Little goes out there and plays fantastic, who knows?
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think there's a possibility that in week 1, Cam is not on this roster. Yeah. I do think that's a possibility. The money savings, you lock in a little bit. Cam's, again, a surly kind of guy, but the production
it's so strange because we were calling for Cam last year like he was the savior of the offensive line. If they can just get Cam back, they'll be all right. Yeah, and they got Cam back, and they really didn't change much.
It's still inconsistent.
They won more games when Cam Robinson was on the field than off. Yeah, so we'll see. All right, so that wraps up that was the 2 positions we really wanted to hit on offense. We'll circle back with a couple of key players here in a minute. But let's go to the defense. So the one position we really wanted to hit on defense was cornerback because we were different at corner, and corner is one that is, drastically going to differ from probably what materializes to ultimately what we came up with.
This is tough. Corner is tough. Before we started this yesterday, Jamal said, I think corner is going to be the one where we differ the most. Mm-hmm. And we did. It was tough. And, again, you look at this defense because it's a new defense. There's Ryan Nielsen. You got guys he imported over who played for him in Atlanta. You got Edmonds. You got Trey Flowers, who could see the veteran acquisitions coming over. Could they make the team? And I had Trey Flowers making the team until one of my final cuts in the secondary. So not as much at safety to me, but at cornerback is by far the biggest challenge for me on this roster.
The one thing at safety is we've had some of those like glue guys like Andrew Wingard, Daniel Thomas, who I think both of them kind of make the bread and butter on special teams, so they should be safe. But those are the type of guys that can change with coaching staff and schemes. Like, does Ryan Nielsen not love those guys as much as maybe previous coaches did? So it'll be interesting to see how that safety materialized. But I think we were exactly the same on safety. Mm-hmm. There was nothing crazy there. Basically the same safeties that were here a year ago. But at corner, there was one guy that I wanted to get on that I couldn't. Montarg Brown. Couldn't figure out how to get him on. I went Christian Braswell, and I kept both rookie corners, and Tyson and Ronald Darby. But I went with Christian Braswell. So I think that was the differentiator for the two of us there.
I kept Monteric. You kept Christian. That was a big difference.
That was the difference. Right. For me, it kind of came down to picking between Christian, Monteric, and somebody whose name is escaping me. But I wanted to keep Buster because Buster won them a game last year. Right. He's played some good football. He's been a solid reserve. But I couldn't give up on either one of the rookies yet. I just think that they're going to keep both of their guys. They're going to keep Jarian for sure. He's a roster lock.
I think he's going to start.
I do too. But DeAndre Prince, I think he's going to be on that roster as a developmental guy. I really do. Mm-hmm. So I landed on Christian Braswell mostly because of the potential. He's another guy similar enough to Cooper Hodges,
Right.
where he had an injury a year ago, never really got going, but they kept him around, and they could have moved on. Wasn't a really early draft pick.
Right.
It was a later round draft pick, but they really liked what they had seen from him at times during the preseason and during camp, and never really got a chance to see it on the field during the season. When I talked to the DB coach, he said, man, he's known Christian since he was recruiting him in college. And he's a guy that just texts him on a Saturday, like looking at film. He could be doing anything else on a Saturday, and he's chopping up old film and sending him clips and asking questions. And I'm like, those are the kind of things that endear you to a coaching staff. If they're at a table similar to what we're doing right now and discussing the pros and cons of a player, you're like, this guy's committed to football.
Now, where do you fall on? I mean, because to me, those the Braswell and Eric Howlett are almost tied together from their spots draft position-wise.
Sure.
Right? And I know, was it last season, year before? We talked to Trent, and Trent was raving about Braswell and Howlett, and we never really saw that materialize on the field. We had a Gregory Jr., who was the Wichita Baptist, right?
That's right.
And he was kind of our guy last year.
He was everybody's guy.
Played great in the preseason, and he was a guy that I ended up having to cut in this season. So cornerback is so difficult because there's not a pattern of what Ryan Nielsen did here last year.
Right.
There's new faces. I mean, you mentioned the Dewey. Is Wingard still around? Antonio Johnson, where does he fit into the defense? So I think in the secondary poses quite a bit of interest because you could have Darian Jones, a rookie third rounder, starting out there in week one. I think cornerback and in that secondary is going to look radically different than it did last year, and I do think the defensive line as well too is going to have a lot of those new faces. But the secondary to me is just so interesting. You see the differentiation between some of the guys, and why you and I felt so strongly about guys we put on the team and had to make the cut for.
All right, so a couple of guys that we didn't roll through that I know were kind of sticking points for us. For you, Jeremiah Ledbetter was a guy that he was like, I'm gonna find a way to get him on the roster. It was tough. Look, there's a roster squeeze at defensive line too, because you drafted two rookies.
Right.
You know Mason's making the team. Is Jordan Jefferson? I don't know.
I think so. I
think he is too. But
think
that's going to squeeze somebody out. So
right.
So you squeezed on Jeremiah Ledbetter, and he played a lot of snaps for the Jaguars last year. I had to leave him off. I also left Adam Gostis off.
Right. I cut Adam as well.
And there was one of the guys that I really wanted to get on the roster, and I just couldn't do it, was DJ Coleman. He spent last season on the practice squad with the team, came back a year later. Bill Shuey kind of raved about him, just edge depth. I was trying to figure out a way to get DJ Coleman on the roster. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. So there were some tough decisions. I went with two undrafted free agents. I also kept Andrew Parker Jr., the linebacker from App State. So those were my two undrafted. Last year they kept one, and Elijah Cooks, who also made my roster.
He was another cut for me. That was so tough.
Cut for him. I wanted to squeeze on. Like Tim Jones has been here.
Right.
Special teams.
He just keeps making the roster.
I
had to leave him on for that.
He left him on. I kept Elijah Cooks instead. But I also didn't keep Joshua Cephas, who I know is like an undrafted free agent, kind of fan favorite already. I'd like to keep Brevin Easton, but I couldn't keep him either. Maybe he's a practice squad guy. So there's some tough cuts. Look, I think linebacker, they're going to keep an extra player or two. That's why I went with Andrew Parker Jr. I think that's going to be part of these new kickoff rules because of the close lineups where guys have to be able to disengage. So I think linebacker type, safety types are going to be prioritized for those extra bodies on that kickoff. So that's why I think Andrew Parker, maybe he's not going to play too much defense year one, but I think he could be a special teams guy day one because he's an athlete, has good size, and that's what he did. I mean, he made tackles at App State. That's all the man did was tackle anything that moved. So I think
Miles Cole, you have him?
I did not have Miles Cole. I think Miles Cole might have been my lone draft pick that didn't make it.
I think so for me as well. The guy is a freak show, Miles Cole.
Yeah.
But he is a project and a half.
Yep.
And he's a practice guy. I mean, it's kind of like Derek Parrish last year. Yep. You're converting him to a position he hasn't played, and you're asking him to do it in the largest draft class. And Jaguars franchise history, 13 players, he gets snipped off, and I think he's playing in the CFL now. But Miles Cole, to me, is similar to Derek Parrish. I mean, he's a freak show if you look at him, but I just could not find a spot, even at edge, to keep him on.
Every rookie's not going to make it. Now, this year's draft class is a little different. Miles Cole, I think, didn't make it for me. And some guys are kind of built in, like Keelan Robinson, because they have a job for him as kickoff returner. They've made that very clear. I mean, he's kind of a built-in roster spot. He's going to be on the team one way or the other for that special teams value, so that way him and Duvernay can be back returning kicks. So that kind of takes the guesswork out of that. That's why I asked the question earlier, does Jordan Jefferson make it? He's in a tough spot where that defensive line squeeze is real. They're going to want to keep an Adam Gostis or a Jeremiah Ledbetter or maybe both, but you can't keep everybody.
Right.
You can't keep
It's
everybody.
tough, and I think offensive line, and I know somebody brought this up during camp to Trent and Doug, was the differentiation between the offensive line and the defensive line. You need the same number of bodies in a sense, but those defensive guys are constantly rotating. And if you're getting the offensive line rotation in there, that's a pretty bad sign that something has gone terribly wrong with health or players not panning out. But you need those big bodies, and that's why I think a Jordan Jefferson will probably make the team in my sense.
Yeah.
Even though he's kind of a man without a position at this point, because in terms of the guy, I mean, you got Devon Hamilton there, you got Robertson Harris, you drafted Mason Smith in the second round. So, I mean, Jordan Jefferson may play, 10% of the snaps all year.
He may not play much.
Yeah, he may play nothing.
He could be inactive on game day, but he'll probably make the roster. I mean, then if you're going to lose out on another rookie, then maybe it's DeAndre Prince. Maybe it's the guy from Ole Miss in that cornerback room, because just like we said, like I sided with the rookie because I think it's just it's going to be tough to give up on. Like, they don't want to give up on rookies. They don't want to because they're on cheap contracts. They're still young. There's more longevity on the contract there. They don't want to, but at some point you have to. So maybe it's Prince. We'll see. I mean, look, they haven't put the pads on yet. They haven't gone ahead and really gotten physical, so we still got a little ways to go to training camp. So that's why this is way too early.
Way too early. Jamal beat me by one last year, so I'm coming back.
We are keeping count of this one, but we do 2 rounds. So we'll do this one, and this is for score.
This is.
And then we'll do a second one toward the end of training camp, maybe that right before they do the cuts, we'll do a second round, which will also add for score. So we'll take the misses from the 2 combined. Or the hits from the 2 combined, and we will have a winner from there.
And so, the winner gets the other one's car.
Oh, is that how we're doing it? All right. So no pressure.
None. Jamal will be walking to work.
No, we'll give a free subscription to the News4JAGs podcast.
That's right. How about that?
There it is. All right. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us for another episode of the podcast. You can always track our stuff down over on News4JAGs.com, and we'll see you next time.